I want to share with you all three images. Image number one, a student on the last day of school before summer vacation. And she knows there's a season that is imminently coming. It's a season marked with joy, with no school, with quality time with friends, sun, freedom, relaxation. And as she looks at the clock in the last 2 minutes of school, of class, maybe she has papers held in her hand, just ready to throw them up and say, "School's out." She is still in school. And the fascinating thing is the joy proper to the summer season is already welling up within her and flowing into her heart. The joy of the season is so much that it overflows in her heart in advance. Image number two. I've never danced behind the ambo before, but if there ever a day to do it, it would be today. And I'm not actually going to dance, but I do want to show you something that our family dog would do the moment he knew we were heading to the dog park. Our family dog, while not always happy to get in the car, when he realized we were heading to the dog park, there was an overflow of dog park joy that he couldn't hold in. He knew the delights of the dog park were imminent, and he would shake and whine like this. He knew what was coming and that it was imminent. Image number three. Me, before I got to wear these rose-colored vestments for the first time in my life. What was going on in my heart before was much like my dog's in his joyful anticipation of the dog park. I've always wanted to wear these vestments. The church says, on the third Sunday of Advent, the celebrants are clothed in the quietly joyful rose-colored vestments. Sorry, I'm not going to be so quiet about it. What do these three images have to do with today? They each capture the reality that the church is currently living. While the Christmas season is still 2 weeks away, we know that it is imminently coming. And that season is marked by so much joy that it overflows into the present day. The church names this day, this celebration, Gaudete Sunday. Rejoice. This is Rejoice Sunday. The season of Christmas has so much joy, it's overflowing into today. And the reason the church wants us to rejoice is because we know the one who is to come. Isn't it interesting that the church asks us to rejoice in Advent, a season of preparation for that true season of joy? Why are we starting early? Well, it's this revolutionary idea from the church that you prepare for a season of joy with joy. Joy itself helps you prepare for joy. And the season of Advent, as we know, talks about the two comings of Christ. So that as we prepare ourselves in this season for Christmas and the feasts, the celebration, we also prepare ourselves for that second coming of Christ. And that is a season of joy. Eternal joy. And by making the little preparations in Advent season, we prepare for that season as well. So the church says, how do you prepare? With joy. With joy. This is a revolutionary idea from the church because it helps us to not be afraid of that second coming. Because fear is crippling, and that's no way to prepare for Christ's final coming. The way to do that is with joy. So I want to do something. I want to make a statement, and I want you to answer within your hearts on a scale of strongly agree and strongly disagree and everything in between. So you respond within your hearts. What is the statement? We are prepared for this year's Christmas feast. We are prepared for this year's Christmas feast. Do you feel prepared? Do you feel ready? Could you go home today and celebrate Christmas? Well, I feel like this oftentimes about, I would say strongly disagree. Sorry, that's where I'm coming from. I feel this way often about the second coming of Christ. It inspires sort of this trepidation in me, like this fear, like, oh, I'm not ready, and Christ is coming. What does Isaiah say today in the reading? Strengthen the hands that are feeble. Make firm the knees that are weak. Say to those whose hearts are frightened, be strong, fear not. And Isaiah's poetry also beautifully paints the season of Christ's coming. The desert and the parched land will exult. The steppe will rejoice and bloom. They will bloom with abundant flowers and rejoice with joyful song. Joy is how we prepare for joy, not fear. So we have to take a look at what it means to truly rejoice. I think that's the imperative that the church gives to us today. And don't ignore the imperative of the church to rejoice. This is to be taken seriously. Well, how do you rejoice? It's a funny question because it's an expression of something that's true, a true joy. But sometimes we're in a season of life where it doesn't feel that way. It feels like we're in the desert. It feels like there's a lot going on and it's busy and I'm just like trying to keep up with things. Well, joy is a fruit of the Holy Spirit. So it's of the principal acts of the love of God in our soul. A good way to look at joy is sort of on this hierarchy of happinesses. So joy is greater than happiness, just as happiness is greater than pleasure. So God blesses us with different pleasures of life, but we know that there's something greater, like happiness. And then joy is something even above happiness. I would ask you to think of joy like this. It's holy happiness. Joy is holy happiness. So when John in the gospel today says, prepare the way of the Lord, how does the church say we should prepare? With holy happiness. Now to obtain that holiness takes love, acts of true love. And that's why it prepares us for Christ's coming. You know what a really tough act of love is, which makes us grow in holy happiness? Patience. That persnickety virtue. Patience. Persnickety, I said that, yes. Patience is not easy. But we know we're called to it. When does St. Paul say we should stop being patient? He says, be patient, brothers and sisters, until the coming of the Lord. There's no day off from patience. He's asking us always to devote our life to patience. Devote yourself in a special way these next 2 weeks to patience. And isn't that just so typical of Advent, waiting for the coming of Christ with this anticipatory joy? Well, we wait in patience for the coming of the Lord, but we let that also overflow into our life and our relationships in being patient. Often we're not patient with ourselves, and we have to start there. Be patient with yourselves. Be patient with your spouses. Do you feel like sometimes in your relationship you're in that desert and it doesn't look like the desert could possibly bloom with abundant flowers? Be patient with your spouse. It leads to holy happiness. Do your siblings drive you crazy sometimes? Be patient with your siblings. It leads to holy happiness. Are you a teacher? Be patient with your students. Do you have pets? Be patient with your pets. What is the exercise of patience? It's using hardships to make progress in virtue. It's a bearing of difficulties without interior complaint. And that doesn't mean to allow an evident evil in the world to continue. That would be complacency towards an injustice. Patience can be present side by side with the effort against injustices. But patience, what an act of love, the kind that brings about the fruit of holy happiness. And at the bottom of it all, patience is an act of love for the one who is to come. I want to return to the image of the student on the last day of school before summer vacation. Although she's in school, the joy proper to the summer season is already welling up within her. The joy of the season is so much that it overflows in advance. She just has to wait. In these winter days that continue, the darkness grows and the light decreases. The silence of John the Baptist in the desert continues. And yet the church commands us to rejoice with great strength, because the strength of our joy is in him, in Jesus Christ, who is truly coming. He's the one who changes everything. The blind regain their sight, the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the poor have the good news proclaimed to them. Christians, be patient, but do so with joy, because the best is yet to come. Whenever I preach, I love to point our attention to the Eucharist, that moment in the Mass which is so filled with grace that it overflows even into this moment, even in the homily. So I can't help it. I just want to point that the Lord is coming. The Lord left us his body and his blood to be present to us. Brothers and sisters, I find great joy in preaching, but the real joy is yet to come.
Wait for the Lord, for he is near. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. Take heart. We have reached the midpoint of our Advent journey. Holy Mother Church invites us to rejoice, for the Lord is near, but also reminds us that we are only halfway there. There's still a long way to go. Ask any kid, and even most adults at this time of the year, what they're waiting for, and they'll most likely respond, Christmas. Yes, people, whether religious or not, are waiting for and anticipating Christmas. As so many children say, I can't wait, but it's 2 weeks away. Well, in the past, when I was able to get out, drive here and there, shop wherever and whenever I wanted to, I often noticed the rubber band phenomenon of Christmas. You know, as a rubber band expands and contracts, people seem to be more friendly and also more irritated at the same time. Have you noticed that? You know, the greetings of Merry Christmas, which have now turned politically correct to Happy Holidays, is often said and then shoved away by someone who's an irritated shopper. Have you noticed them? They're the grabbers just as you're about ready to take something off the shelf, or the pushers who like to get in line just before you, or the shovers who push you out of the way as you're trying to look at something on the shelf. And then, of course, there are those Happy Holiday shoppers who complain all the time because what they're looking for isn't quite what they want. And then there are those mumblers. You know, they mumble under their breaths about how busy they are and how much they don't like this, and on and on. And then occasionally you even bump into Scrooge. And they seem to suck all the joy out of waiting for Christmas. So many seem so impatient. And yet the church puts before us these words from St. James from our second reading. Be patient, brothers and sisters, until the coming of the Lord. In our Catholic understanding, patience is a virtue. Now, a virtue is an action that becomes a habit and is exercised for the love of God and for the good of our neighbor. Virtues take energy. Virtues take effort. This is what the Catholic Dictionary says about patience. Patience is a form of the moral virtue of fortitude. Patience enables one to endure present difficulties and evils without sadness or resentment, in conformity to the will of God, which is often a mystery. Patience is mainly concerned with bearing the evils caused by another. It continues. The three grades of patience are to bear difficulties without interior complaint, to use hardships to make progress in virtue, and even to desire the cross and afflictions out of love for God and accept them with spiritual joy. That's a steep ladder to climb. I can't tell you how edifying and grateful it is that so many of you are availing yourselves of the sacrament of reconciliation during this Advent season. Father Poje and I, last week after the Immaculate Conception Mass, we didn't get home until about 8:30, and we had heard confessions earlier in the morning and at noontime. Without breaking the seal of confession, one of the sins that I so often hear as a confessor, and that I confess when I go to confession, is a lack of patience. It goes kind of like this. I've been impatient with my kids. I get so frustrated with them. I'm so impatient. I hate waiting, especially in line. It makes me irritable and I snap at other people. Or I get so impatient with my wife. Then we start to argue. I just can't stop and listen. I get so frustrated and impatient with myself. Well, however it is that you might manifest impatience, we are invited today to enter into these final 2 weeks of Christmas and to grow in the virtue of patience. To exercise patience for the love of God and the love of our neighbor. And most of the time, our neighbor is the person sitting next to us or across the table from us. Yeah, it's our family, our spouse. So how do we grow in this virtue of patience these final 2 weeks of Advent? Do we merely kind of grit our teeth? I'm fine, thank you. I'm not at all impatient with you. Or do we just put up with it and let our kids do whatever they want to do? Or do we swallow our impatience and our anger and our resentments and then get spiritual indigestion? Well, a couple of thoughts about maybe how to grow in the virtue of patience in these next 2 weeks and then maybe beyond. So, number one, trust in God's care and love for you. Trust that God never gives up on you or me. And I would suggest praying the litany of trust. If you don't know it, look it up on Google. It's a beautiful litany. I find it very, very helpful. Number two, pray for the grace from God to grow in the virtue of patience. Ask the Lord for insight into what it is that's kind of irritating you. Number three, expect challenges in your daily life. So think and talk with others about how to respond to these challenges. You might find great insight from others' wisdom. Number four, talk about your impatience with your spouse and with your children. Not at the moment when you're most impatient and you're just about ready to snap, but no, over the dining room table or when you're just sitting around. Just talk about it. And then be the first to admit when you get impatient and then how best to handle it. Number five is take 5. That is, wait 5 seconds before responding when you're feeling impatient. Pray for 5 seconds this beautiful, simple prayer. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, make my heart like yours. Pray that simple prayer before you respond in frustration, or maybe with a hurtful word or a cynical and cutting remark. Take 5. Most Sacred Heart of Jesus, make my heart like yours. Number 6, don't waste your impatience. In other words, offer it up. Unite it with the sufferings of Jesus and the sufferings of humanity. Remember that the crib and the cross both held Jesus. And number 7, be grateful. Call to mind how blessed you are. Focus on giving thanks. Give blessings away as often and as generously as you can. Well, if you have found other ways to grow in the virtue of holiness and patience, please tell me after Mass so I can include it in tonight's homily. And then I can also offer it to others in the confessional when they confess their impatience. So, my friends, let us pray for one another these final 2 weeks of Advent, that we may grow in the virtue of patience and exercise it by being patient, understanding, and compassionate with one another around the dining room table, at home, on the way to school, and also that we can be patient and compassionate with others so that we might show God's love for them through us. Patience, brothers and sisters, patience. Wait for the Lord, for he is near. Wait for the Lord, be strong, take heart.